Welcome back, everybody. These are the horror films, the best horror films that came out in 1972. Let's check out which horror films, what kind of horror films were scaring audiences all over in 1972. Let's check it out. Dracula, AD 1972. In 1972 London, a century after his final battle with Professor Van Helsing, Count Dracula is resurrected by occultist Johnny Alucard. Dracula AD 1972. Frogs. A group of helpless victims celebrate a birthday on an island estate crawling with killer amphibians, birds, insects, and vampires and reptiles. Next up we have is Gargoyles. This movie was scary when it came out. An anthropologist, paleontologist, and his daughter, while traveling through the southwestern U.S., stumbled upon a colony of living, breathing gargoyles. Ugh, that's spooky. Godzilla vs. Gigan. After a manga artist and his friends uncover a plot by his employers at an amusement park to lure Ghidorah and Gigan to Earth, Godzilla is called to defeat them. Moon of the Wolf, featuring David Jansen. After several locals are viciously murdered, a Louisiana sheriff starts to suspect he may be dealing with a werewolf. Moon of the Wolf. Night of the Lepus. Giant mutant rabbits terrorize the Southwest. Night of the Lepus. Next up we have is the famous horror film that came out, Tales from the Crypt. 5 strangers get lost in a crypt, and after meeting the mysterious crypt keeper, receive visions of how each will die. Oh, how spooky is that? They're going to get visions how they die. The Mummies of Guanajuato. The mummy of the legendary wrestler Santen awakes 100 years after his death. As Satan was also a powerful sorcerer, vows, and the wrestlers killed them. The Murder Mansion. A couple lost in thick fog take refuge in an old mansion next to a cemetery. The Murder Mansion. Who will live? Who will die? The Night Stalker. This was scary when it came out. An abrasive Las Vegas newspaper reporter investigates a series of murders committed by a vampire, the Night Stalker. Next up we have is Tower of Evil. A group of experienced archaeologists are searching for an old and mystic Phoenician treasure when they are surprised by a series of mysterious murders. A Reflection of Fear. A disturbed young girl starts believing that there is something very sinister at work after her estranged father visits her. A Reflection of Fear. A Thief in the Night. The story of Patty, a young woman living for the present with little concerns for the future. Drama, fantasy, and horror. A Thief in the Night. Next up we have is The Killer is on the Phone. Slasher. When a beautiful actress returns from a short trip to London, a mysterious man begins to stalk her. The killer is on the phone. Asylum. In order to secure a job at a mental institution, a young psychiatrist must interview 4 patients inside an asylum. Next up we have is the classic thriller, Ben. A lonely boy befriends Ben, the leader of a violent swarm of killer rats. Ben. Next up we have is the horror film Beware My Brethren. A religious sect called the Brethren has taken control of a widow Birdie, sending her unstable son on a killing rampage. Beware My Brethren. The best horror films of 72, Beware of the Blob. A technician brings a frozen specimen of the original blob back from the North Pole, thaws it, and then it goes on killing people. But this movie is funny. Blood Freak. A biker gets a job at a turkey farm and agrees to act as a guinea pig for some chemicals that need tested. Blood Freak. Burke and Hare. Two men go into business supplying medical colleges with cadavers by robbing graves. Burke and Hare. You'll not disappoint. Byleth, the demon of incest. A man who's been in love with his sister since childhood returns after a year's absence to find she has married. The demon of incest. This is sick and depraved. Child's Play. The original Child's Play. At an exclusive boys' school, a new gym teacher is drawn into a feud between two older instructors. Child's Play. Drama, mystery, thriller, and horror. Curse of the Headless Horseman. A phantom horseman who appears every night with a human head tucked under his arm lets it be known that he is searching for 8 gunfighters. Ooh, how spooky. Dear Dead Delilah. A sickly matriarch of a dysfunctional family living in an old southern mansion teases her siblings about finding long-lost treasure. Dear Dead Delilah. Death Master. Quarry is a mysterious, articulate stranger who draws a cult-like following of local hippies. Death Master. Horror. Demons of the Mind. A physician discovers that 2 children are being kept virtually imprisoned in their house by their father. Demons of the Mind. Next up we have is Dracula, prisoner of Frankenstein. Dracula kills another innocent victim and Dr. Seward decides it's time to wipe him off the face of the earth. Dracula, prisoner of Frankenstein. Dracula AD 1972. In 1972 London, a century after his final battle with Professor Van Helsing, Count Dracula is resurrected and goes on a killing spree. Dr. Jekyll vs. the Werewolf. Paul returns as El Hombre Lobo, the Wolfman, for the 6th time as he searches for a cure to his full moon madness by visiting the grandson of the infamous Dr. Jekyll. Dr. Phibbs rises again. The vengeful doctor rises again, seeking the scrolls of life in an attempt to resurrect his deceased wife. Dr. Phibbs. Fear in the Night. A young woman recovering from a nervous breakdown moves with her husband to a boys' school and finds herself being terrorized by a mysterious one-armed man. Fear in the Night. Frankenstein 80. A mad scientist creates a monster called Mosaico who breaks out of the laboratory to hunt down and kill beautiful women. Frankenstein 80. I don't know if it takes place in 1980 or 1880. Frogs. A group of helpless victims celebrate a birthday on an island estate, crawling with killer amphibians, birds, insects, and reptiles. Next up we have is Garden of the Dead. Convicts on a chain gang snip experimental formaldehyde fumes to get high. They break prison and go on a killing spree. Garden of the Dead. Barren Blood. A young man visiting the castle of a murderous ancestor in Austria accidentally brings his dead relative back to life, searching for new victims. Godzilla vs. Gigan. After a manga artist and his friends uncover a plot by his employers, Godzilla sets out to defeat the 2 evil aliens. Godzilla vs. Gigan. Grave of the Vampire. A young man born of rape committed by a legendary vampire against a living woman vows to locate and vanquish his undead father. Grave of the Vampire. Horror Express. While on the Trans-Siberian Express, anthropologist and his rival must contain the threat posed by Former's cargo. Horror Express. Images. writing a children's book. A woman interrupted by images, unsure if they may or may not be real. Drama, horror, and mystery. Images. Invasion of the Blood Farmers. Somewhere in upstate New York, a secretive group of farmers are harvesting human blood for a mysterious purpose. Invasion of the Blood Farmers. Fury of the Wolfman. A man has had a werewolf curse cast upon him. If he doesn't get rid of it, he turns into a killer werewolf when the moon is full. Naked girl murdered in the park. An investigator is assigned to investigate a man's family after he is found dead only hours after taking out $1 million insurance policy. Next up we have is the horror film Daddy's Deadly Darling. The owner of a roadside diner and his nephew helper kill people and feed them to pigs. Daddy's Deadly Darling. Next up we have is the raunchy horror film Pink Flamingos. Notorious Baltimore criminal and underground figure Divine goes up against a sleazy married couple who make a passionate attempt to kill her. Pink Flamingos. Blackula. An 18th century African prince turned into a vampire by Dracula finds himself in modern day Los Angeles. So check out Los Angeles in 1972. Premonition. Red flowers cause 3 college girls to have deadly premonitions. Premonition. Next up we have is El Robo de las Momias Guanajuato. Mummies of Guanajuato. Count Calistro and a scientist bring the mummies of Guanajuato back to life, and El Santo, the Mexican wrestler, must defeat them. Santo versus Frankenstein's daughter. Again, a mad female scientist needs Santo's blood for a youth serum, and she has Frankenstein's reliable old monster to help her get it. So again, Frankenstein versus the monster. Season of the Witch. A neglected, unhappy suburban housewife gets mixed up in witchcraft with unexpected consequences. Season of the Witch. Next up we have is the original Silent Night, Bloody Night. A man inherits a mansion, which once was a mental home. Silent Night, Bloody Night. Does he go crazy? Does he go on a killing spree? Check and find out. Stanley. A young Seminole Indian uses his rattlesnake to take revenge on all of those he believes have wronged him. Stanley. He loves getting revenge. I love these revenge horror films. Daughters of Satan. An antique dealer living in the Philippines buys an ancient painting of witches burning because one witch looks identical to his wife. How spooky is that? Super Beast. A doctor finds a jungle laboratory complete with mad scientists and genetic engineering experiments. Super Beast. And lastly, we have The Legend of Boggy Creek. When this came out on TV, everybody was scared. A documentary-style drama about the folk monster, Bigfoot Boggy Creek, that has been sighted in and around Folk, Arkansas since the 50s. The Legend of Boggy Creek was scary. Those were the horror films that scared everybody, audiences all over, in 1972. Again, more Dracula, more monsters. What do you think about the horror films in 1972? Do you remember any of those? If there's any horror films that I may have left out, leave those titles below and I'll cover them. Again, my list is not all inclusive, but I've done my research and I should have every film on my list. So I think I have a perfect track record. I'm just joking. But those are the horror films that scared everybody in 1972. Again, if there's any films I left out, let me know below. The 70s are great for horror films, and we all know the best decade of horror was the 80s. But we'll get there soon enough. But right now, we're showing you how the films of the 80s, the horror films of the 80s, were crafted because of the horror films of the 70s, alright? So those are the horror films that we loved in 1972. Let's check out 1973. I'm Tony, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.